Hello. In today's class, I will be discussing Bohr atom model of hydrogen atom. I will divide this discussion into 5 different parts. We have to include so many ideas, so many topics, so that it is better to divide it. So, in the first part, let us start the discussion on how Bohr developed his atom model. Niels Bohr, he was from Denmark, and he was born on 1885. He came to England on a fellowship. He came to England in 1911. At that time, he visited Cavendish Laboratory in University of Cambridge, and he met J.J. Thomson. He also did some small research in cathode rays also. Then Rutherford invited him into University of Manchester, and that was in 1911. Rutherford's model of this idea of atomic nucleus was just published at that time. Just after he was completing the alpha particle scattering experiment series. So Bohr was there in University of Manchester. Then he came back to Denmark in 1912. Then during this time, in between 1911 and 1913, during this 2-year period, Bohr was working on the complications of atom model. So we have already discussed in the previous class that Rutherford atom model raised some questions regarding the stability, whether it was not stable or it was in contradiction with the classical electromagnetic theory, and also it could not explain the origin of spectral lines. So Bohr was thinking and working on these problems for these 2 years, and in 1913 he published 3 papers. These papers were known as the trilogy in physics. So these trilogy papers, they came out in July, September and November 1913, and his atom model of hydrogen he proposed in these 3 papers. Not only this atom model, he did many other things in these 3 papers. He put forward different ideas. We will mention some of them also. So let us start. So Bohr, So the starting point of Bohr atom model is essentially Rutherford model. Okay, he accepted the structure of the atom proposed by Rutherford. So what were if we just remember the basic features of Rutherford model, the most important point is the entire positive charge. The first point is that the entire positive charge of the atom and most of the mass of the atom are concentrated at a small central region called the nucleus. That's the first point. Then second idea is that the size of the nucleus is very small compared to the size of the atom. For example, the size of the nucleus is of the order of 10 raised to minus 15 meter to 10 raised to minus 14 meter, whereas the size of the atom is 10 raised to minus 10 meter. Okay, about 10 raised to 4 times larger than that of the nucleus. And the third point is the total positive charge of the nucleus and the total negative charge of the electrons are equal, so that the atom is electrically neutral. And Rutherford even put forward a planetary model of the atom in which electrons are revolving around the nucleus. But this was the point that contradicted with the classical electromagnetic theory. Okay. So these are the salient features of Rutherford model, and Bohr started from them. Okay, the first 3 points he accepted. The idea of the nucleus, the size is very small compared to size of the atom, and the total charge of the atom is neutral. Total positive charge and negative charge coincide. So with these ideas, he started the model of hydrogen atom. Okay. So if we draw a diagram with the Bohr model with the idea, it is something like this. Consider the hydrogen atom. So it's already known that hydrogen atom consists of only one unit of positive. The nucleus consists of only one unit positive charge. So we can say the nucleus of the hydrogen atom is like this, plus E. Okay, and the electron is revolving around the nucleus. In Bohr model, electron is considered to be revolving around the nucleus. This is electron in a circular orbit of radius r. Okay, it is revolving around the nucleus in a fixed circular orbit of radius r. Let us say the mass of the electron is m and the charge is minus e. So this is the structure. So we know that the structure comes from Rutherford model. Now based on this structure, Bohr's starting point was 3 postulates. Okay. So the first point is regarding the structure. We can say that in the hydrogen atom, the electron is revolving around the nucleus with the Coulomb force of attraction between the positively charged nucleus and the negatively charged electron. Okay, the force of attraction for this circular motion, or we can say the centripetal force for the circular motion, is the Coulomb attraction between electron and the nucleus. Okay. Now the three postulates. Three postulates of Bohr were this. The first postulate was electron revolves around the nucleus not in all possible orbits. Okay, electron revolves around the nucleus only in certain specific orbits, or we can say only in certain discrete orbits. So the first postulate, we can say the idea of discrete orbits of electron. Electron cannot revolve in all possible orbits around the nucleus. The value of r cannot be anything from 0 to infinity. Okay, r can have, the radius of the orbit can have only certain discrete values. So that means electron's orbit cannot be everywhere. It can have only certain specific radius or certain specific positions. Now the condition for the electronic orbits, or we can say the quantization condition for these electronic orbits is that angular momentum of electron in the orbit about the center of the atom, this should be an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. Okay, this mvr is the expression for angular momentum of the electron about the consider an axis here passing through the nucleus, a perpendicular axis passing through the nucleus. So the angular momentum of the electron about this central axis is this mvr, and according to this quantization condition, this angular momentum should be an integral multiple of h by 2 pi, where h is Planck's constant and n is an integer. N is 1, 2, 3, etc. So in this expression, m is the mass of the electron, v is the orbital speed of the electron, r is the radius of the orbit as shown in the figure, and this angular momentum should be an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. So that means only those orbits are possible, only those orbits for electron are possible such that the angular momentum, orbital angular momentum of the electron should be an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. So this is called Bohr's quantization condition for electronic orbits. In physics, in quantum mechanics in particular, this h by 2 pi combination always appears. Okay, so always it's useful to introduce a new notation for this h by 2 pi. Usually the notation used is h cross. It's called h cross or h cut or h bar. So this h cross is equal to h by 2 pi. You know the value of h, 6.626 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second. So if you divide with 2 pi, the value will be 1.055 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second. So you can see it's also of the order of 10 raised to minus 34. And okay, so this expression, so we can also write in this way, MVR is equal to NH cross. In this form also we can write. Okay, and since I have introduced this H cross, let me also express another useful combination of quantities. We have already seen that the expression, this HC, this combination will always appear in many calculations. For example, energy of a photon having a particular wavelength, it's equal to h nu in terms of wavelength, hc by lambda. So if you know hc in terms of electron volt or mega electron volt, it is always useful to calculate. So this expression for hc we know it is 1240. Actually this is SI unit is in joule meter. If you convert into the electron volt meter, it is like 1240 electron volt nanometer. We can also write as mega electron volt femtometer. Okay, this we have seen. Similarly, we can also think about this combination H cross C. Okay, this also can appear in many equations. So you just divide HC by 2 pi. So H cross C will be 1240 divided by 2 pi, 6.28. So what you get is 197.45. Okay, electron volt nanometer or 197.45 mega electron volt femtometer. This is sometimes in many calculations you can approximate this as simply 197. Okay, you can check this one. Okay, it is a very useful, convenient quantity for calculations. So HC is 1240 and H cross C is 197, approximately 197. Either you use electron volt nanometer in atomic physics or mega electron volt femtometer in nuclear physics calculations. Alternatively, we can use that. Okay, so this is Bohr's quantization condition, which is the first postulate. Now the second postulate is this. Bohr argued that when electron is revolving around one of these orbits, okay, one of these allowed orbits, we can say, then it will not radiate any energy. In other words, these electronic orbits are non-radiating. They are non-radiating paths. So if electron is not emitting any radiation, what about its energy? Its energy will remain constant or fixed or stationary. Okay, so in this sense these orbits are also called stationary orbits. You have to be careful here. When we say stationary, it doesn't mean that electron is stationary in Bohr model. Okay, electron is not remaining stationary. In Bohr model, electron is orbiting around the nucleus. But what is stationary is energy of the electron. Okay, it is the word stationary is used in the sense that constant or fixed. Okay, so the electron's energy is stationary in the sense that electron's energy does not change with time. It does not decrease. Okay, it's a fixed, it's a constant. So these orbits are non-radiating paths, or they are stationary orbits, or the state of the electron in a particular in this allowed orbit can be called stationary states. Now it is you think about the objection with the Rutherford atom model. The main objection with the Rutherford atom model was that it doesn't explain the stability of the atom. For if electron is revolving around the nucleus, according to classical electromagnetic theory, it has since it has a centripetal acceleration, any accelerating charged particle should emit electromagnetic radiation. So if it has a centripetal acceleration, it should emit radiation. the frequency of the emitted radiation should be equal to the frequency of revolution of the electron. So if it radiates energy, its radius of the orbit should decrease, so that the radius will decrease, it will move in a spiral path, and finally it should fall into the nucleus. Okay, that will destroy the atom, but atom is stable. So that was the problem with the objection with the Rutherford model. That is, this revolving electron model was in contradiction with classical electromagnetic theory. According to that theory, this model is not stable. But what Bohr did was, he simply said that electron is revolving around the nucleus, but it is not radiating. Then isn't there a contradiction with classical electromagnetic theory? According to classical electromagnetic theory, this revolving electron should emit electromagnetic radiation. But Bohr says that in his second postulate, he says that electron should not radiate energy. So there is a contradiction. But Bohr simply said that classical electromagnetic theory need not be applicable in the realm of atomic physics, inside the atom. Okay, there it need not be applicable. That's what Bohr is saying in this second postulate. He simply said that classical electromagnetic theory, the rules of classical electromagnetic theory is not working, is not applicable here. Okay, so that is the second postulate. Now the third postulate. In the third postulate, Bohr tried to explain how spectral lines are produced. Okay, so in Bohr's idea, suppose this electron is orbiting in a particular stationary orbit. Then consider an electron orbiting the nucleus in a stationary orbit of higher energy, let us say E2. Then suppose it undergoes a transition or a quantum jump to another stationary orbit, another allowed orbit of lower energy E1. So let me diagrammatically draw this as, suppose this is the energy of the higher energy orbit. I am not drawing the orbit, I am just showing two different energies. And this is the energy of the lower energy orbit. So this is a higher energy orbit, this is a lower energy orbit. If the electron undergoes, so electron is originally here, it undergoes a transition. So when the electron undergoes a transition from a higher energy orbit to a lower energy orbit, then this difference in energy will be emitted as one photon of radiation. This difference in energy is emitted as one photon of radiation. Here Bohr is using the idea of Planck, Max Planck and Einstein, that the electromagnetic radiation is in discrete units. Energy of electromagnetic radiation is in discrete units, and one unit is h nu. One energy quantum is h nu. This is actually originally the idea of Einstein. So this photon of radiation, the energy of this photon of radiation is simply the energy difference between these two states. That is, h nu is equal to E2 minus E1. Now this photon of radiation emitted appears as a spectral line in the emission spectrum. Okay, this is the idea. How spectral line, an emission spectral line is produced. So an emission spectral line is produced when the electron undergoes a transition from a higher energy orbit to a lower energy orbit. Then the difference in energy, E2 minus E1, is emitted as one photon of radiation. So these are the three postulates from which Bohr started, and from which he derived a series of results. So what we are going to do now, so let us consider these as our starting points. So the idea of these postulates, so when I say postulate, the meaning of a postulate, the word meaning of a postulate is axiom. Another word is axiom. It means that it's a self-evident truth, or it's a statement, a truth about a system which cannot be which is not derivable from any fundamental theory. These are some basic facts about the system. So the postulates here, Bohr's postulates here, are in the spirit that, let us start with these three statements, these three ideas, okay, about discrete orbits whose and the quantization condition is this. We don't know how it comes, okay, for the time being. and they are non-radiating orbits. Still, we know that this is in contradiction with classical electromagnetic theory. So Bohr essentially says that, let us say, simply accept that classical electromagnetic theory is not working here. Okay, so Bohr is saying that let us start with these three ideas. Okay, and let us try to derive some results, and then we will compare these results with experimental data. If there is a good agreement between our calculated results starting from these three ideas and the experimental data about the hydrogen atom, it means that these ideas are valid. If there is a mismatch between, a grave mismatch between the theoretically calculated values and the experimental data, it means that our results are not valid. We have to come back, we have to modify, and we have to restart. Okay, so this is the spirit in which these postulates are stated. These are some starting points from which we have to calculate some values which should be compared with the experimental data, and we have to see whether there is a good match or not. So let us start from this, and in this first part I will derive the orbital radius, an expression for orbital radius of the electron. Let us compare with the experimental data, and also I will derive an expression for orbital speed. So let us first try to derive orbital radius, an expression for orbital radius. Okay. So our starting ideas are this. We are talking about hydrogen atom. Electron is revolving around the nucleus in a circular orbit of radius r. The centripetal force for this circular motion is provided by Coulomb attraction between the nucleus and the electron. So we can say that the centripetal force mv square by r is equal to Coulomb force. But here let us take into consideration the sign convention. Remember, this was our figure, right? Now here we can say that the nucleus is at the origin. Nucleus is the origin, and this radially outward direction, let us say r cap, this is the positive direction. Okay. So what is the expression for then, vector expression for centripetal force? mv square by r unit vector minus r cap, because centripetal force is always towards the center. Now this is equal to, this should be equal to, the centripetal force is equal to Coulomb force of attraction between electron and the nucleus. So what is the expression for Coulomb force? 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 q1 q2 by r square. Now q1 is plus E, nucleus, nuclear charge. q2 is minus E by r square, unit vector r cap. Okay, so this minus sign comes from the electronic charge. It means that the force of attraction between, so this, if you look at the right hand side, the direction of the force is along minus r cap towards the center. So it simply shows that the electron, the force is attractive force towards the center. Centripetal force is towards the center, Coulomb force is towards the center. Okay, so we can simply equate the magnitude. This minus r cap here and minus r cap here we can remove. If I equate the magnitude, I can write magnitude of centripetal force is equal to magnitude of Coulomb force. We know that both are towards the center. The discussion on this direction simply shows that both are towards the center. So the magnitude of Coulomb force is 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 E square by r. Let me call this equation 1. We will be using this throughout, that is why I am writing it separately. Okay, so this is one point. Centripetal force for the circular motion of the electron is equal to the Coulomb force of attraction. Now, this we can, now second point is this Bohr's quantization condition for the circular orbit. What is that? Angular momentum should be an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. Okay. So we have to derive all our results starting from these 2 points. Centripetal force is equal to Coulomb force and angular momentum is an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. Now look at equation 1. So I have to put a square here. 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 q1 q2 by r square. Maybe in the earlier equation also I have made that error. You have to correct. Okay, now here in equation 1, 1 r will cancel on both sides. So this will cancel, there will be an r here. I can take that r to the left side. So from equation 1, I can write mv square r. So this comes from equation 1. Okay, 1 gives r I am taking here. So mv square r is equal to e square by 4 pi epsilon 0. Let me call equation 3. Clear? Now, what I want to derive is an expression for orbital radius of electron's orbit. So you look at equation 2 and equation 3. Okay, we have two unknowns here. One is orbital velocity, orbital speed, and the second is orbital radius. Okay, and all other quantities are constants. This is electron's mass. All other quantities are constants. So let us say if you want an expression for r, we have to eliminate v, orbital speed. So in order to eliminate v, an easier way is you square this equation 2 you square and then divide with equation 3. Then if you square it, you have a v square here. Already you have a v square here, that v square will cancel. So what I am going to do is let us square equation 2 and then divide with equation 3. So the left hand side of equation 2 becomes m square v square r square divided by this one. Okay, m v square r equals, and the right hand side is equation 2 you have squared, so it becomes n square h square by 4 pi square divided by equation 3, that is e square by 4 pi epsilon 0. Okay, now the left hand side is v square is cancelled, m is cancelled, 1 r is cancelled, so m into r is equal to n square x square by 4 pi square. Here you have to multiply with the reciprocal, so 4 pi epsilon 0 by e square. So what is the expression for r? You can take m to the left side and 4 will cancel, 1 pi will cancel. Right, so we have n square x square epsilon 0 divided by pi m e square. You can see that radius is quantized. Okay, n is an integer. We can call it a quantum number. Remember that this n is equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. n is 1, 2, 3, etc. So as n have different n takes different values, radius also takes different values. So all possible radius are not allowed. Okay, only specific only orbits of certain specific radii are allowed. So radius is quantized. Incidentally, what is a quantum number? Okay, it's a set of integers that expresses the discrete values of a physical quantity. A set of integers that expresses discrete values of a physical quantity. So these integers can be positive or negative. In our case, it is simply a positive integer, 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, so in order to specify that radius is quantized, we can put a suffix here, Rn. Okay, these are the quantized values of electron's radius. Now you put, suppose n is equal to 1. Okay, then we have radius of the first orbit in hydrogen atom. Usually, as the symbol used for this is A0. Since many equations you can rewrite in terms of A0, I mean this first orbit expression, a standard symbol is used for that one, A0. Okay, so what is the value here? You put n equal to 1, so you have h square epsilon 0 by pi m e square. All these values are known. H is Planck's constant, epsilon 0. This value, this is the permittivity of free space. Its value is 8.854 into 10 raised to minus 12. Then pi m is mass of the electron, 9.11 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram. E is electronic charge, 1.602 into 10 raised to minus 19 coulomb. You substitute all these values and you do this calculation. You can show that this is equal to 0.53 angstrom, 0.529 angstrom. So let me round it off to 2 decimal points, 0.53 angstrom. You check this value, okay, verify this calculation. Therefore, you can write the nth orbit, radius of the nth orbit as this, n square times a0, right? Radius of the nth orbit, you can say n square times this quantity, x square epsilon 0 by pi m e square is first orbit. So this shows that radius is proportional to n square. As the quantum number increases, radius increases like n square. For example, if you take the ratio between the first three orbits, R1, R2, R3, okay, the first three orbits, they are in this ratio 1:4:9, like n square. So the second orbit will be 4 times greater than the first of the radius will be greater. Third orbit will be 9 times greater, the radius of the third orbit. Okay, so that is the expression for the radius. So let me write that expression here. Rn is equal to n square h square epsilon 0 by pi m e square. Let me call this as 4a. Okay, I am going to write the expression for radius in different ways. And you have got another expression here, n square times a0. Let me call this as 4b, where a0 is 0.53 angstrom. Okay, now before proceeding to the next physical quantity, let us spend some more time here. I am going to get another expression for radius in terms of an interesting physical quantity. Let us consider that. Okay, let us come to this expression. Okay, we have squared equation 2 and divided with equation 3. Now the right side, let me write in a slightly different way. See, equation 2, I have written angular momentum is nh by 2 pi. Remember that h by 2 pi we can write as h cross also. So if I choose to write this as nh cross, then this numerator I can write as n square h cross square, right? Okay, then as before, left hand side we can simplify. We have m into r is equal to n square h cross square divided by, let me write this simply as e square by 4 pi epsilon 0. Okay, if I take m to the right side, r is equal to n square. Now I rewrite this in a slightly different way. 1 h cross I am taking to this denominator. Okay, so you have only h cross here, then m you will have, then a c also I will introduce here. Okay, so you have let us see if this is correct. C will cancel with this c, and this h cross is in the denominator. This okay, 1 by denominator. So if this will be going to the numerator, you will have h cross square. Okay. So this expression and this expression m I have taken from the left side. So this expression and this expression are same. Now why I am writing like this is, this quantity e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 h cross c. This is a very interesting quantity in physics. This e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 h cross c. This quantity is called fine structure constant. Fine structure constant. It's a dimensionless quantity. Usually we use the symbol alpha for this one. You can check that it's a dimensionless quantity. Okay. Let us try to calculate its value here. Now in one of the previous classes, I have specified that this quantity e square by 4 pi epsilon 0. This also you can check. E square by 4 pi epsilon 0 has the dimension of joule meter, energy length, energy into length. So anything with the dimension joule meter, you can try to convert it into electron volt meter. So if you convert this into electron volt meter, what you get is, that means you just divide with electronic charge. What you get is 1.44 MeV Fermi. This you can check. So I am going to use that quantity here. So e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 is simply 1.44 MeV Fermi. And remember h cross c, this we have done, I have shown this calculation. H cross c is 197.45 MeV Fermi. Now you can very well see that this alpha is dimensionless. MeV Fermi and MeV Fermi will cancel. Now this you can write in another way. I can take this 1.44 in the denominator. So we have 197.45, 1 by 197.45 divided by 1.44. So the result is 1 by 137. 197.45 divided by 1.44 will be 137. So in order to remember, it is better to express alpha like this, 1 by 137. So this alpha is equal to e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 h cross c, which is equal to 1 by 137, a dimensionless constant. This constant appears in many different equations in physics. So let us, so what I am going to do is, let us try to write this expression for orbital radius in terms of fine structure constant. So Rn, since n square is quantized, n square appears here, I can use the suffix n, is n square h cross by mc into 1 by alpha. Okay, this is also another expression for orbital radius. We can easily check whether R1 is the same value. This time R1 is equal to, what you get, h cross by mc into 1 by alpha. In order to simplify the calculation, what I can do is I can put a c here, a c in the denominator, so this becomes c square. So we know all these different parts. H cross c is 197.45. We can also use 197. mc square, m is the electronic mass, so mc square is the rest energy of electron, which is 0.511 MeV. So this is MeV Fermi. Okay, this is MeV. And what is alpha? 1 by 137. So 1 by alpha is simply 137. Okay, so MeV will cancel. Fermi is 10 raised to minus 15 meter. So if you do this calculation and rearrange the power of 10, what you get is again 0.53 angstrom. This also you can check. So now you can understand that this equation, using calculation with this equation is a lot easier than using calculation with this equation. Okay, you can check the first Bohr radius, and this is called Bohr radius. Okay, the first the radius of the first orbit of the electron is called Bohr radius. So you can get the value of Bohr radius from this equation as well as from this equation. You verify all these things. You verify the value of e square by 4 pi epsilon 0, also h cross c, and then you verify for alpha. Okay, these calculations you should do. Okay, so that completes the discussion on orbital radius. Now let us go to orbital speed. So second we will discuss orbital speed of the electron. Again come to these two equations, equation 2 and equation 3. This time we want to eliminate the radius and we want to get the other quantity, velocity. Now it's very easy, you just divide equation 3 with equation 2. There is a v square here, there is a v here. So if you divide 3 by 2, then you will get v. So take equation 3 divided by equation 2. What is 3 by 2? Left hand side is mv square r divided by mvr. So we have mv square r divided by mvr equals, here right side in equation 2 is e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 divided by, this is, I am writing in terms of h cross, okay, because I want to get the expression in terms of alpha. So left hand side is simply v, m and r will cancel, v square and v will cancel, and here we have 1 by n into e square by 4 pi epsilon 0 h cross. So in order to introduce this fine structure constant, I am putting a c here, okay, a c here. Okay, now this quantity we know it is alpha. So now you can see that orbital speed is also quantized. So I can put an n here, c by n into alpha. A simple equation. Let's call it equation 5. Okay. So maybe here we have got one more equation for radius earlier. So Rn is equal to n square h cross by mc into 1 by alpha, right? Let us call it for c. This is the expression for orbital speed. You can see that Vn is inversely proportional to n. As n increases, speed will decrease. Okay, so when the electron moves to the outer orbits, its speed will decrease. That means kinetic energy will decrease. Okay. What is the speed? Typical speed in the, so the maximum speed will be in the first orbit, right? Let us calculate that speed in order to get an idea. So n equal to 1 gives v1 is equal to c into alpha, right? What is c? 3 into 10 raised to 8. Alpha is 1 by 137. So divided by 137. So immediately we can see, you can guess. This is, if you take this as almost 100, what you get is 3 into 10 raised to 6. Okay, so immediately we can guess this is of the order of 10 raised to 6 meter per second. Some 1 by 100 times 1 by 100th of that of the speed of light in vacuum, right? Because this quantity is in the denominator. It also means that exact value, if you do this calculation, it is 2.2 into 10 raised to 6 meter per second. But the important point is to remember that it is of the order of 10 raised to 6 meter per second. And this is in the first orbit. Okay. If you go to outer orbits, since n appears in the denominator, if you go to outer orbits, the speed decreases. So the speed, typical speed of electron in the orbit in hydrogen atom is of the order of 10 raised to 6 meter per second. It shows that these electrons are non-relativistic electrons. We can do non-relativistic calculations on these electrons. So this is all. In the first part, I want to discuss only these many points. So I will write here c by n into alpha. Okay, and the speed is of the order of 10 raised to 6 meter per second. And this radius of the hydrogen atom at the time in this Bohr's paper came in 1930. Prior to that time, the radius of the hydrogen atom were already measured experimentally. Okay, to a very accurate extent, And this value, the calculated value of Bohr, was very close to the experimentally available data at that time. So this means that Bohr was on the right track. This calculation was correct. Okay, so this was the first confirmation with the experimental data. Now we can complete this part here. In the next part we will move on to other physical quantities.